Somebody online recently said that if you never deployed to a combat zone, you shouldn't have the right to call yourself a veteran. And honestly, I get why this conversation hits nerves. But I'm going to explain why that guy is an idiot. If you appreciate honest conversation that is born from real world and real lived experience, then please hit that like button, maybe subscribe and stick around for some honest conversation. Not slogans, not flashy video. It's just me, a fat guy on the internet, talking to you over the internet. My name is Matthew Heneghan. I am a former Canadian Armed Forces medic turned paramedic turned author and podcaster. Here's where I share my thoughts about life, the things that I see, the truth as I see it. And I kind of take you along for the ride. So if that's your thing, stick around, hit that like and subscribe button. Okay, so let's talk about this. The word veteran is very well defined in Canada, and I believe, through UK and US and everywhere else. It's a term that carries a lot of weight, a lot of respect, a lot of reverence, and as it should with respect to military service. It carries grief. Carries pride, it carries trauma, and in many cases it carries identity. And more often than not, especially in recent years with social media becoming what it is, and especially after 2020 when we all lived online and more people got access to podcasting equipment and more people put their thoughts out into the etherverse, I've been seeing this argument pop up more and more online about the term veteran should only be reserved for people who deployed to combat zones. And I'm going to show you an example of somebody that wrote something really stupid. But first, I'm going to give you some context behind what I want to talk about. So this is the post here that I came across. Now, I'm posting this guy's card because he put it up there too. So that's what I'm posting it for. He posted this as like he's proud of it. He says, for a long time, I didn't think this card really made me a veteran. 1 year of service, no deployment, no combat. I thought veteran meant something else, something more. War zones, multiple tours, the kind of service you see in the movies. But here's what I've learned. A veteran is anyone who has raised their right hand, took the oath, went through training, and served, regardless of how long or where. Whether it's 1 year or 30 years, whether it's peacekeeping or combat, whether you deployed overseas or served at home, if you wore the uniform, you are a veteran. Pretty spot on in my view. But of course, like any other social media sphere, if you take a stroll through the old comments section, let's just switch that to all comments so we can pick up everything. You're going to see a whole swath of things. You got guys here that say, 5 years of service, always thought of myself as a former service member rather than veteran. You have the right to think of yourself as you wish, right? I'm not here to tell you, but you need to call yourself a veteran. But I'm not here to do that. I am here to confront a couple of other people though, and I'm going to see if I can find him here. I believe it's this guy here. Yes, Brandon Richard, this guy whose ego is made of glass, dude. Holy smokes. Okay. So firstly, before I rip into Brandon too much, Brandon is a veteran. Brandon is somebody who did deploy, who did go to combat and served Canada. So for that, he deserves our utmost respect. And he has my utmost respect. I am critiquing his arguments, not his character. I don't know Brandon personally. So everything that I say here is not against Brandon, the person. It's against Brandon's words, the things that he wrote. I need to make that perfectly clear before we continue on, because the internet is a weird place and it can really blow things out of proportion. And I do not want any chance of Brandon coming across this video and thinking that I am denigrating him and disrespecting him or his service. Brandon, first and foremost, you deployed overseas and you served Canada, and I thank you for that. The things that you have endured are things that not many people, myself included, can truly fully grasp and understand. That doesn't make me less of a veteran than you, and I'll explain. But here's what Brandon had to say. He says, there is a difference. I deployed, you did not. You are a former service member, not a combat veteran. So instantly right here, he adds combat in front of veteran. He has to make that delineation. He didn't say he was a combat veteran. He said he's a veteran. There is no card for combat veteran. There is no plaque for combat veteran. There is no certificate for combat veteran. There is no award for combat veteran. Not in Canada. The U.S. has some different badges and awards that delineate who's been in combat and who has not been in combat. Canada, not so much. Canada's rules around awards and medals and badges are a little more strict and tied to kind of the monarchy style of things. I mean, Canada really is still part of the monarchy, even though we are technically not part of the. It's a whole big mess for anyone coming through. But so he says, not a combat veteran. Cool. He never said he was a combat veteran. So there's your first interjection and argument that isn't even being made. He says that doesn't, but I think he says that doesn't make your service any less. Good point. As there are many people who never deployed, there always has to be someone in the rear. Absolutely. However, just because your card says veteran doesn't mean you should take the title. Absolutely does. He earned that card. They don't just give you that card. You have to apply for that card. That card is tied to your service record. They go through your service record to find out if you are a veteran. Yeah, they go through and find out what your service record is. And hey, guess what? This guy, he's a veteran. That's why the government went through the process of paying money to create this card to ship it out to him because he is a veteran. Full stop. Anyway. Just say you were a former service member and be done with it. Anyone that has to put on the uniform knows the difference. You should respect it. Hey, you know what? You know what's crazy? And I actually write about it down here, and I'll tell you. But keep this in mind. Keep this what he said here, right? That unless you go into combat, you're not a veteran. You're a service member. Keep that in mind, okay? Because I want you to keep that in mind. And think of Remembrance Day. For those of you who are part of the UK and Canada, Remembrance Day is much more kind of integral to our society and to our identities than the US. But, you know, the US keep Veterans Day in mind. So that's what he has to say. And then this guy says, yeah, he never claimed to be a combat veteran, did he? Right? Fair point. He says, I believe the term veteran should be reserved for those that have deployed in whatever capacity to a combat zone. That's called a deployment. That's part of what you do in the service. That's part of what you do as a cook. It's part of what you do as a clerk. It's part of what you do as a doctor. It's part of what you do as a nurse. It's part of what you do as a photographer, deploying to combat zones. You may not be up on the front line going pew-pew, but you deploy. And even when you don't deploy, which I'll get into, you're still a veteran. If you're serving in Canada, never deployed, then you should never refer to yourself as a veteran. Get fucked. That's retarded. This is what I mean by the guy's fragile ego. He's trying to gatekeep because, you know, if he has to give up the term veteran to all these other people that he thinks are lesser than, oh my God, then what does that mean for him? It's not as prestigious for him. His whole thing is tied up in this. A serviceman is perfectly honorable. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with sharing the term veteran with somebody that had a different career path than yours either, buddy. But you seem to have a real big issue with it. You continue to go on and talk about service members as opposed to veteran. It's like it's really kind of crazy. I end up writing something down here, and I'll try to find it. Here we go. This is my response. This is my response, and this is why I think that what he said is stupid. So I address him, Brandon, Richard. More than 50% of veterans in World War II did not deploy. You're going to tell them that they're not veterans? This is why I said to keep Remembrance Day and Veterans Day in mind. Here is a breakdown, a commonly cited breakdown repeated in multiple summaries, mostly by the Canadian National War Museum. 50% of the Army never left Canada. 75% of the Air Force never left Canada. If you apply that to the War Museum totals, as in the Army who stayed was 731,000. And over about 50% times 450, that's 365,500 people that you're calling from the greatest era, greatest generation, non-veterans. From the Air Force, 250,000 with a 0.75 rate. That's 187,000. So the total number of people that stayed in Canada did not deploy, 553,000 people during World War II, which equates to about 50.9%. So round up to 51%. So at least 51% of Canada's World War II full-time service members, Army plus Air Force alone, never even left the country, which means they didn't deploy to overseas combat theaters. You, Brendan, are a combat veteran, but as of now, there is no card that delineates combat veteran from veteran. The bottom line is that you serve and reach the legal threshold of veteran status. You are a veteran, full stop, and I will die on that hill. There are people and organizations in place that decide what the legal threshold for veteran is. Not you, Brendan, not your ego, not your inability to comprehend that everyone's career path doesn't, revolve around combat arms and doesn't revolve around deployments. There are plenty of people who served in the 80s, for example, when deployments were kind of at an all-time low. You're going to tell them that they're not veterans because they didn't go to the Korean War because of their birth date? They served 25 full year career. You're going to tell a chaplain that he's not a veteran because he's a serviceman. You're a serviceman or a servicewoman. That's what you're going to do. That's the hard line you have to make because your ego is so fragile that you can't possibly share the term veteran with people that had a different career path than you within the same organization as you. Sir, that is retarded. That's so unbelievably fragile. I can't even comprehend really why you think that way. It honestly kind of baffles me. It boggles my brain a little bit that there are still people out there that really hold these thoughts, views, feelings, and opinions. This guy wrote this whole thing, and he wrote it as though it's fact. Now, here's the thing, and I understand where the sentiment comes from. I think maybe saying retarded is a little harsh. I can go back and erase. I'm not going to. I got to stand by my mistakes too. I think it was a little harsh. I got to slow down a minute. I understand where the sentiment comes from. Okay, I understand where the clear delineation between somebody who stayed in Canada, the relative comfort and safety within Canada, and somebody who deployed overseas. I stayed in Canada as a medic. I went to reserves. I had people try to stab me. I had people spit at me. I had people try to give me communicable diseases. I saw death in varying forms, in varying places. That was part of my job as a medic in the Army. I didn't have to deploy to see death. I didn't have to deploy to see young dead bodies. I didn't have to deploy to see murder. But according to you, that's not worthy of veteran status. Now, I understand because when you think of people staying back at home, it is relative safety and it is not war. War is not the same as deploying to a reserve in Canada. It's not even close. There is no comparison there. I really do understand where that sentiment comes from. I mean, combat changes you. I have many friends who are combat veterans, and I knew them pre and post conflict, and it changes you. Deployment changes you. People who have been downrange have lived through something that very, very few people experience in the world, especially in the developed world. Very few people know and understand what it's like to be downrange from an enemy that truly wants to kill you and that you have to truly engage to try and kill as well. That is a very unique thing to go through, and that is something that you should be respected for. And the term veteran being shared by those who haven't had that experience doesn't diminish what you went through. It doesn't diminish that you went and had that experience. It doesn't diminish the service that you've given to Canada. You have the medals that stand you out from the people who did not do that. They are on your chest. They're in your service record. They are on your file. And Canada and most Canadians never know what you've done because most Canadians that are outside of your social circle have zero idea. Most civilians don't even know what your medals mean. Not a clue. Not a clue. They can't differentiate the medals on the left side and the right side. They don't know why. They just see medals and that's it. Ego is where things come in and what forces people to want to like kind of, push back and be like, no, this is me. He can't wear those. You can't have that. He's not a veteran. He didn't go and do what I did. No, you're right. There's thousands of people that have never done what there are millions of people that have never done what you've had to do. So I get where the sentiment comes in. There is a loss attached to it because even when you live through combat, you're not the same person. First responders that do the job for a while aren't the same people that when they started. Through 5 years of being a first responder, you are vastly different from when you first started. So there is a loss there, even when you live. There's blood attached to memory. There's chaos. There's things that settle in your nerves that never go away. You carry them for the rest of your life. Fully understand that. I fully empathize with it. There are things that I carry in my nervous system that I can never get rid of. Hence my diagnosis with post-traumatic stress disorder. But this is why the conversation matters, because the military isn't just one job. It's not just combat. It's not just boots on the ground, guys kicking in doors, whatever. It's thousands of jobs. It's mechanics, signals, intelligence, logistics, training staff, clerks, engineers, instructors, supply, transport, aviation, maintenance, cooks. I think I said clerks, chaplains. I could go on, but I'm going to get lost in my ramble. But like, you understand, it's not just one job, right? The infantry, combat arms guys, they may be the backbone of military service. Absolutely no argument for me. No argument for me. Combat engineers, special breed of human being, man. Those guys are something else. Special forces, those guys are something else. There are still support staff within special forces. Not everyone's a door kicker. Not everyone's going in to pick up bin Laden, right? But there's a lot of special forces out there. Every single one of the roles that supports the machine that make deployments possible are a cog in the machine. They are veterans. They are servicemen and women while they are serving. When they retire, when they leave from medical or from whatever, then after that, they're veterans. They've earned that title. Whether you think so or not, they've earned that moniker, and they can wear it just as proudly and brightly as you do. There is no need to denigrate. There is no need to gatekeep. Nobody can take your title away from you. You are a veteran. You are a combat veteran. That is uniquely you. And you can own that with pride. But you don't have to try and take away something in order to be prideful. That's where the fragile ego comment comes in. It's not about participation trophies either. Before you get into that argument, right? Canada doesn't give a medal for graduating basic training. Canada doesn't give a medal for somebody who's just been into combat. Right? Canada doesn't hand out participation trophies. You can talk about your King Charles medals and the Queen Jubilees and et cetera and call out, but they're not. Those things have a selection process. And there's very limited numbers of medals that go out. So the competitiveness to get those medals is high. And so, you can have those arguments all you want, but they're not participation trophies. Getting the term veteran, you have to go through basic training. You have to complete basic training. Not everyone could do that. We had a pretty high attrition rate when I went through basic training. I think we started something with 60 to 70 people, graduated with 40, 45, something like that. If that actually, I think it was a bit lower than that. We had a big number of people, like 10, 12 people quit the day we got issued our gear, and you got to take all your rucksack and your barracks boxes and stuff. You got to haul it up the stairs and get all your stuff up there within a certain time. We had tons of people quit right then and there. And then from that day forward, they made us carry a VR sheet, voluntary release form, in our breast pocket as a form of psychological motivation to us and psychological warfare, as it were. to kind of mock us with the potential of quitting for the rest of basic training. Like, defining service is subjective, right? Two cooks that go through school together and become cooks and get deployed to different units or get sent to different units have totally different career paths. I know a medic that when we were going through, and it was a heavy time then. We were graduating in 2006, so war was pretty heavy in the Canadian Armed Forces. And he got sent to Toronto for his first posting. Toronto. He was doing med screening for people joining the military. After 5 years of being there, he got sent to Borden, Ontario to be an instructor. After his time as an instructor, he was reposted to Borden, but to work in the clinic. So that's 15 years of non-combat deployment by no fault of his own. But he still went on the field exercises. He still had time away from family. He still did the Winter X and the X Maple Guardian, et cetera, et cetera. He's a veteran. I mean, he's still serving, but when he gets out, he's a veteran. Period. Full stop. He's in Latvia right now, I think. There's no combat happening in Latvia, but we've lost members in Latvia. You're going to say they're not veterans? They're not veterans. They're servicemen to you when they get back. Okay. It's such a, to me, it's such a funny thing. I served. I wore the uniform. I was a medic. I may not have deployed, but I got sent on multiple taskings. Like I said before, up to Indigenous reserves. I got attached to civilian ambulances around Edmonton, and I saw firsthand the drug epidemic that was sweeping through in the early 2000s. And then in 2010, when I was a civilian, I worked on the ambulance in Edmonton and saw the full fentanyl and carfentanil epidemic going through. But when I was attached to civilian ambulances. I was working with civilian medics. I was working in hospitals. I got attached to hospitals to work rotations in ER departments. These are real life and death situations. People that needed help, people that needed my care, people that I had the skill set to do because the military had given me that skill set, and I was implementing and using that skill set to keep it sharp in the event that I was deployed, in the event that I was to go. I worked alongside people who saw combat before Afghanistan ever started. And I worked alongside people who had been in for almost 20 years and never saw combat. And not one was sharper than the other. Not one was more of a soldier than the other. Not one was more of a medic or a better medic. They had different careers, but they were still venerable members of my unit, people who I respected, people who I looked up to, who I valued. And now they're veterans. They're veterans who every Remembrance Day still polish their boots, put on a uniform, whether it's Legion or whether it's just a nice dress uniform that they have, and they parade. They're veterans. The truth is, and nobody likes to talk about this, not all trauma comes from bullets. And not all contribution comes from firefights. Those two things should never be devalued. Those two things should never be denigrated. But those two things should never be the measuring point for what defines a veteran, because there is so much more that goes into military service. I took part in the repatriation ceremony for Corporal Andrew Eykelenboom. He was the first Canadian medic killed in combat since the Korean War. He was 23 years old, and I was 23 years old when I was given that task. It is a task, a day, and an undertaking that sits with me every single day and will for the rest of my life. I will be an old man, hopefully, if all goes well. And I will think back to that day as if it was yesterday, because I can close my eyes and it can be right there again. Every smell, every feeling, every sensation of the wind, the direction of the wind. I can feel the cement beneath my feet. I can tell you where the imperfections are in the tarmac. You can't tell me I'm not a veteran. I carried that man to his final resting place in Comox, BC. I met with the family. I saw the devastation. A couple of years later, I did the same as an honor guard for Corporal Michael Starker. Another medic, another death. I buried him in Calgary. I saw the family. I saw the devastation. And I carry him as well. And there are many more names and many more things that I could get into. And it might fall on deaf ears when it comes to you, Brandon, but firefights and bullets, those aren't the measuring stick of a veteran. Navy veterans don't get into firefights the same way that infantry veterans do, but they are still veterans. Drone operators don't get into the same action that door kickers do in Spec Ops, but they're still veterans. Some drone operators work out of Nevada and they fly drones overseas. They're veterans. Some people hold stretchers. Some people fix vehicles at 3 a.m. so that convoys can roll out. Some people wake up at 3 a.m. so that eggs can be cracked, potatoes can be mashed and peeled, and breakfast can be served on time, every day, all day. They scrub pots and pans, and they work tirelessly with blisters on their feet and burns on their hands, doing up tent, down tent, moving to where the next objective might be, whether it's in Canada or overseas, so that soldiers can eat, so the army can continue with the objective. There are hundreds and hundreds of jobs within the Canadian military. Some people train replacements. Some people are great at training. Some people run the supply chain. Some people spent years away from their families, moving from base to base or operation to operation, and they do so in the unglamorous hours of the morning because it's in Canada. They're going to Suffield. They're going to Wainwright. They're going to CFB Alert. They're going to Nijmegen to do the march out in Norway. They're doing training exercises in Valcartier, Quebec. They miss time with family. Not everyone that stays in Canada gets Christmas off. It's not an office job when you're in Canada, especially during wartime. They give up their bodies. They're broken. A lot of these people, I have a buddy of mine whose back is never going to be the same because of all the rucksacking he did. He never left the country. Never left the country. Completely f***ed up his back. Has had multiple surgeries on his back prior to release. Then he got medically released. That man is a veteran. No medals on his chest. Not one. Maybe the CD. But that's a decoration, not a medal. That I'm saying that because you would make that distinction. It boggles my brain that we have these conversations among our own cohorts, right? That there would be so much time spent trying to denigrate, and this isn't like a unique phenomena. Like this is something that like takes place a lot. Like this guy here, this is awesome. Kevin, I raised my hand, took the oath, signed the dotted line, and served for 23 years, never deployed, still a veteran. Absolutely. The first thing that this Tanner guy says, I'm impressed you dodged deployments for that long. Thank you for your gainful employment. Like, completely asinine thing to say. I'm going to give that an angry face because fuck him. Such a stupid thing to say, dude. And then the reason people say stuff like this is because they hide behind little pictures like this, because it's the avatar of anonymity. You don't have to see the ramifications. He would never say it to his face. This guy's a fucking chicken shit. He would never say it to somebody's face, ever, unless he had like 5-10 beers in him. But never say it to his face. This guy here, so this guy, Brick, he wrote, I would point out that many wartime veterans only served for 1 or 2 years before being wounded or killed, or the war just ended. The war just ended. Length of service is immaterial. It's the service itself that matters, in my opinion. And then this person here, V. Chris, which officer cadets deployed to war? And then she tries to be all clever, or no, this guy responds and says 0. In like 2022, we lost an officer cadet into training in Canada. So because it's not combat, that's not a worthy sacrifice anymore. They signed the dotted line. Training, people die in training all the freaking time. The job itself is, and that's exactly what he says here. That up top, he says, it's the service itself that matters. So she's trying to denigrate, because the original poster, this guy, he's an officer cadet, and she's trying to denigrate and say, oh, officer cadets don't deploy. And so therefore, something not a veteran, etc., blah, blah, blah. Which is just ridiculous. But, he's right. It's about the service, not the deployments. Because not every soldier gets deployments. Like I said, people that served in the 70s and 80s, there wasn't a whole lot of deployments to be had. Not a whole lot. Canada wasn't doing a whole lot during those times. Like, I understand the emotional reaction behind, veteran. I get it. When you've been to war, you don't want to have that experience diluted. Fully understand. I get it. I do comprehend that as somebody who has not been to war. You don't want the word veteran to become soft or simply symbolic, but the term veteran is symbolic, because a wide swath of the greatest generation that spawned the ceremonies that we hold dear, like Remembrance Day and Veterans Day, a large swath of them never deployed. They're still veterans. I challenge you to go up and tell a World War II person they are not a veteran because they didn't deploy overseas. This past Remembrance Day, I watched the ceremony on television in Ottawa, and they interviewed an older guy a World War II veteran, who entertained troops. He was a singer and a dancer, and that's what he did. He entertained on stage. Never deployed. That was his thing. He was a singer. He did commercials. He did wartime efforts. You can tell him he's not a veteran? You're gonna stand there with a straight face and tell me that you would do that? Because you wouldn't. You wouldn't, and you wouldn't. But you'll do it online because you got that little protection, that little, I'm safe here. I can say it here. I could be a dickhead here. I could be an asshole here. I could be quick-witted like that other idiot there. Oh, you dodged deployment. You don't know his career. But you insinuate. Yeah. Good for you. Good. Nice one. Dude, badass. You're such a badass. You're like GTF times 12. Holy shit. Morons, dude. I respect that you don't want the term diluted. I respect it. I do. I respect that you don't want the term, but giving the term veteran to people who have earned the title is not a dilution. It is a recognition of service. And not all service is designed the same. Full stop. I'll down that hill. Veteran doesn't mean combatant. It's not synonymous with combatant. Show me in the dictionary, look at the term veteran, and then show me where it says combatant. They're not connected. There is no concatenation there other than when it comes to military service, we go, hey, you know what, veteran, yeah, military guys, yeah, they might have. People look at soldiers and go, they've probably been to war, because that's the general layman's understanding of what soldiers do. But those of us who are initiated, we understand better. We know, which is why I find it even more depressing that you try to strip away the term veteran because of your own ego. It boggles my brain even more. You're better than that. You know better than that. So you making that argument is even more just absolutely disappointing. That's the best way I can put it, is disappointing. Veteran means, it doesn't mean combatant. Veteran means you served in the armed forces and you completed that service in whatever fashion it was. That's it. That is it. The military is far more than just deployments and combat. Far more. There are people that deploy all around Canada during disaster relief, wildfires, flood, ice storms. They're leaving their families. They're leaving their comfort. They're leaving their lives to go and interject on Canadians' behalf and help them out of tough spots. You're going to say they're not veterans because of that? Because it's not bullets and bombs and Taliban? Like, really? So what do we do? What do we do with this? How do we resolve this? I think the first thing we do is we use clear language. If someone deployed, they're a combat veteran. Easy peasy. Combat veteran. That distinction matters and it deserves to be there. So maybe we start promoting that, combat veteran. Or maybe we write to our government and say, hey, we don't want participation ribbons and trophies, but maybe there needs to be some sort of signifier on somebody's uniform, much like the U.S. have. They have that blue rifle to indicate when somebody's been in combat. Maybe we need something similar in the Canadian Armed Forces to indicate when somebody has deployed and has undertaken combat. Because I think that's a worthwhile thing. Because like I said, very few people actually do it. And the people that do it, yeah, absolutely, they should be recognized and they should be celebrated and they should be respected and be venerated among their peers. So maybe we look at doing that. But then you get the argument of, well, we don't want to be anything like the U.S. Okay. So instead you want to strip away the term veteran from thousands of Canadians. And eventually over years, millions of Canadians. You want to strip away the term veteran, whittle it down to a finite number of servicemen and women who actually go to combat because there's combat to be had. But in times of no combat, people that serve full 23, 25 decorated careers, they're not veterans because there was no combat. So you want to denigrate that. You want to gatekeep and whittle away the definition of veteran to fit that very myopic, very narrow corridor, as opposed to trying to come up with a distinction, a badge or a medal or some signifier that could stand you out in a crowd. And then maybe the term combat veteran becomes very clearly used when speaking about people like you, people who have deployed, people who have gone overseas and gone into combat. But yeah, let's just not be like Americans. It doesn't have to be American. It doesn't have to be American. It could be uniquely Canadian and still signify that you've been in combat. It's not a participation thing. You've earned it. You've earned that. You've earned that distinction the same as veterans have earned theirs. Service is service. Combat is combat. Both deserve respect, and one doesn't cancel the other out. You're not more of a veteran because you went to combat. You're a veteran. The same as the clerk who served 25 years shuffling our paperwork and scheduling all of your flights and making sure you could get to combat and come home from combat and get your paycheck. is a veteran. I don't understand how it's that hard. I don't understand. I think it's important that, we acknowledge the differences. And that's what I postulated before about having some sort of signifier, some sort of distinction that can separate and delineate, right? We have different unit patches. We have different unit patches to signify when you're from Western Brigade or from Eastern Brigade or 2 Brigade. We have different cap badges to signify what trade we're in. We have different color berets to signify what element we're part of, whether it's Air Force, land, or Navy. So I don't understand why it would be such a stretch to create some sort of distinction for those who have seen and endured combat on Canada's behalf. Our institutions can definitely help, I think. Veteran organizations, governments, and military communities can do a better job at explaining the roles within the military, explaining the roles of Canadians during things like Afghanistan and what we're doing in Latvia right now, instead of the ambiguity that Canada generally operates under. You want to keep ambiguity for our special forces? Fair enough. Yep. Fine. Like, I'm okay with keeping them in some sort of a nebulous sort of idea of what they might do, as opposed to the specificity of what they do. But with identifying combat veterans from just Canadian Armed Forces Service veterans, when you start trying to come up with those different names, that's where you're going to start complicating things. I endured this with being a paramedic. They still do it today. There's ambulance driver, there's EMT, there's EMR, there's EMTA, EMTB, then there's paramedic, then there's critical care paramedic, then there's critical care flight paramedic. The pre-hospital emergency care system should be paramedic, because it's para. It runs alongside. It's part of a system. Make it simple. The public loves simple. The journalists aren't going to take their time to sit there and go, yeah, Tommy's a combat he's a combat veteran. He's not a generic veteran. Like, they're just not going to do it. So you can't have your cake and eat it too, is what I'm saying. Start coming up with ideas instead of insults. Come up with ideas. Come up with incentives. Try to change the status quo, as opposed to invalidating those you don't know. Was that a rhyme? Did I just rhyme? That was unintentional. I didn't mean to do that. We should also remember, and this is important, that most people that join to serve don't do so for titles. Most people. Some do, sure, just like anything. Some are glory seekers, sure. Not an insult. It's just you run across all different kinds of people when you join large institutions like the military, and but for the most part, you don't do it for the titles. You did it because you believed in something bigger than yourself. At least that's why I did it. They wanted direction, or they wanted discipline, or they just, things weren't going well at home, or there was no jobs, or they have a family history, right? The reasons are varied. But the bottom line is, they signed that paper. The paper that literally says you could die, both within training and on deployment. We could send you somewhere, you could die. You could die by doing what we ask you to do. And they signed. That's a pretty hard paper to sign, especially when you look at 18, 19, 20, 21. It's a hard paper to sign, man. I filled out my first will before I was 19. That's crazy. That's not an everyday occurrence for most 18-year-olds. But I did it. And I had a general understanding of what that meant. And when I carried Boomer, I fully understood what that meant. And I never asked to take that paper back. If we want stronger veteran communities, we need less gatekeeping and far more understanding, far more unity. Just like when you go through basic training, you can't complete the task without your buddies. You can't. That's what the whole thing is designed to teach you. somewhere along the way, when we get out of the military, we lose that because ego starts to take place. Ego supplants those ideals that we used to have and those ethos. It's sad. It's sad. But those are my 2 cents. Anyway, I want to hear from you. People who have served. It doesn't have to be in the Canadian Armed Forces. It could be anywhere. I want to hear from you. Do you think a veteran, the title veteran, should be reserved for those who have had combat deployments only? Or do you think those who make the willful and dutiful decision to serve and serve go through the training, go through the legal process of becoming a veteran should be worthy of that moniker? Tell me down below. And if you served, if you deployed, or if you never deployed, tell me how you feel about this conversation, about my thoughts, about the things that I've had to say. And if you did deploy, like Brandon, thank you. Sincerely, thank you. Please do not take my rhetoric for insults to you. I am castigating what you wrote, not who you are. I don't know you. I really would love to hear from people. I'd love to hear from you guys. So if you come across this, write something down below, but keep it thoughtful, keep it respectful, right? We don't need internet rhetoric of being dumbasses and, all this other stuff. There's no reason for it. Yeah. So anyway, that's all I have to say. If you like these kind of conversations, if you like just kind of sitting down and hearing me ramble for a while, please feel free to hit the like, share, and subscribe button. It really does help the channel out, helps me grow, makes me feel like I'm doing a good job, the good old thank you very much. Be well, be safe. I love you guys. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other, yeah?